Hello, a lot of familiar faces. My name is Jason Snell. I run a small creative print shop, design shop, retail shop right down the street called We Become Vikings. Basically for me, I guess I left the agency world, and the 9 to 5 in a cubicle, and you're working with big brands, and I said, I want to start my own thing, and it's going to be about a rock and roll spirit and punching upward, and we're going to take on the big boys, and that was great and all, and got to work with like Virgin America and Amazon and some really fun things. And then what happened was Megan happened, and I started to see the change that they had in the community. I started to see things like Hale Foundation, started to see like what philanthropy is and what that does. And Cosign was the really first initiation for me to see like you can do these things on a small scale, and they start to interrupt and disrupt what's happening in that community in a positive way. And for me, I said, that's where I want to be. I want to take this creative endeavor and spirit and attitude and really start giving back to my community. And that's when I met my wife, where she came from Portland, and she's like, I'm like, why would you ever want to move back to Cincinnati? Everyone's leaving. This is a handful of years ago. And she's like, no, I get to have my dream job of changing over the Rhine and help, recapturing that spirit and what the hard work that was put into this place. And for me, I said, all right, well, I got to set up shop and I got to do these things. So this project Cosign came about, and I just saw the process of working, creatives working with architects, creatives working with the city. Like, what does it take? Okay, you sit there and design logos all day, or you design a brief or websites, whatever. But what does it take to actually do something in your community? What does it take to actually craft something and have it hang out there? What does it take to take an idea and have it live on longer than you might? So I really started to dive in to not only Cosign, but People's Liberty and what they were doing for their communities. And I started to say, doing the big agency stuff's great and all, but it doesn't really point back to what we're doing in our community, what we're doing with our neighbors and speaking to our neighbors. So from then, I started to design things like the Legend series, working with artworks to say, let's start telling these stories about what happened in our communities 100 years ago, 50 years ago, 20 years ago. Let's start celebrating people. Let's start talking. Let's having conversations about individuals that had a big impact and maybe have been lost and forgotten. So things like the Legend series with artworks, where the first one was the Cincinnati Strongman that you'll see on Vine Street. It was one of those things where I wanted to know about my community. If you look at Vine Street, all the empty all the parking lots used to be theaters. And before the internet, people would go there and be entertained. So, I understood that on my block, the Cincinnati Strongman was on my block. Okay, well, let's tell his story. You drive down the street, down 75, you see Ezra Charles Boulevard. What does that even mean? Who's that old white guy? No. That guy was a heavyweight champion of the world, and he lived right here in our neighborhood and did great things. So for me, now getting inspired from things like Cosign, and realizing there's more to being a creative than seeing a brief and 9 to 5 at your cubicle, I started to realize that there's people in our community that care and have these great stories and have, there's visual to those stories. And really it's about storytelling. And for me, with Cosign and People's Liberties and Hale and just starting to understand what all that means and being able to work with creatives and be in my community and realize that, you can make a living by doing amazing work for people that are right next door. So thank you so much.